noticed that this person might have a different issue, right? So he asked him about his parents. He's like, so bro, how are your parents? This person started talking about how his parents, kind of used to force Islam on him. They weren't always there around, they weren't in his life, all the time. They kind of like neglected him somewhat, or he was very uncomfortable with how his parents brought him up. And so it became more of a psychodynamic situation. It's a personal matter that this is the reason why this person rejected Islam and ended up becoming an atheist. It had nothing to do with rationality or him actually rationally, denying the existence of God. It was more so a personal matter. It was a personal situation, his upbringing. So that just goes to show that sometimes we just need to deal with the person at a personal level so that we can uncloud their fitrah. We realize that there is a fitrah within, and all we need to do as dua is awaken that fitrah, bring it back to life, because it is in there. And this is why we have reverts. MashaAllah, we have how many reverts in the room today? 1, 2, and maybe Brother Sadiq, you can say at one point maybe kind of a revert. Yeah, alhamdulillah. So, this is the beauty of Islam, brothers and sisters, is to awaken that fitrah. And we would love to hear your stories. Would you guys like to share maybe just a quick 30-second, 1 minute of your background and what awakened your fitrah?
I can do 30 minutes.
Okay, now wrap it up in 30 seconds, 1 minute.
Okay. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Oh my goodness, now I gotta figure, I gotta sum this up real fast.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, I'm gonna try and talk a little bit faster. As a little child, growing up, public school, learned about Islam, Muslims, saw the Kaaba, said, mashallah, not exactly mashallah, but that is the most beautiful sight I have ever seen. Fast forward a few years, when I was in 8th grade, 14 years old, my appendix ruptured, had no idea about it, felt like somebody was ripping my body in half. They took me to the emergency room, had no idea, they did emergency surgery. Out of my stomach came nothing but pus and infection. The doctor said, by all means, you should not be alive, you should be dead. The doctor said, even if you had been 5 more minutes, it would have been impossible to save you. You should have died. Fast forward, about 4 or 5 years, I went into the Marines. I went into Iraq in 2003. My group was the very first group to cross the lines into Iraq. And there were countless times that I should have died. I lost 5 incredibly good friends. One of them was standing literally next to me and was shot dead in the head. And so I was blessed through my time. One time I had a bomb land, literally right where this camera is, and it did not explode. And I had incidents like this occur 4 or 5 times. Through the blessings of Allah, I did not die. And I literally owe my life in thanking Allah for allowing me to live. And it was in my time in Iraq. There was one point in time, I looked at the ground. It was just as the sun was rising. Hundreds of miles into the desert, I remember scooping up the earth, looking down, and I saw these most beautiful seashells and sea fossils and crustaceans from thousands and thousands of years ago when all of the deserts were covered by sea. And I thought it was the most beautiful thing in that moment. And it was at exact that moment, just as the sun was rising, I literally felt the presence of Isa, the presence of Ibrahim, the presence of Moses, the presence of Allah, literally there, like with their hand on my shoulder saying, Mark, you will be okay. Do not fear. You will be protected.
So at that time you already had some kind of background of Islam and...
Nothing. It was my experience there.
Okay.
I met the people of Iraq. They were the most beautiful, most humble, most kind, most wonderful people I have ever known in my entire life. Literally, they invited us to come in their house, to have breakfast, to come have dinner with them, to have tea with them. When they saw us sleeping outside on the ground, they invited us to come into their house and sleep in their house. And I was completely blown away. I was thinking about this just the other day. Had Mexico invaded the United States, how would we respond? We would probably go crazy and kill them, right? But here we are in the invading nation of the United States, and here they are inviting us to come live in their house, to give us shelter and to give us food.
Very deep, right?
So I was so touched by the people that when I came back to the United States, I was blown away. I thought, okay, the best way to learn about a people is through the religion. You're in Europe, you're in the United States, Christian countries, you study the Christian way, you can understand their laws and the way the people are. Islamic nations, you want to learn about the people, read the Quran, they're a Muslim nation, you read the Quran, you understand the Quran, you understand the people. So when I came back, I bought the Quran in English. I read the entire Quran, front to back, beginning and end. And I was just blown away how beautiful it was. And so fast forward about 10, 15 years, a good friend of mine. She was a Muslim. We were talking because I always had personal divisions of myself with the prophets, with the saints, with the relics, with the praising and worshiping of Jesus, when always he told us, pray to God. He always told his disciples, pray to God, do not pray to me. So I had deep divisions in my stomach, but I was very, very religious. I was actually going into seminary to become ordained into the Catholic faith as a deacon, like a priest. And it was at that time, but I had these deep divisions in me. My friend, we were talking, said, you have all these deep divisions, you have this inner conflict, all your beliefs, you have the Quran at home, you have a prayer rug at home, everything that you believe is what we believe in Islam. Why not come see for yourself? Because they had never stepped foot in a masjid. So she's invited me, why don't you come to masjid with my family so you can see Islam, how we pray. And so subhanAllah, I went, they invited me, and I thought this was absolutely beautiful for the Friday Jummah. It was the most beautiful thing I'd heard of. Just the way they spoke, the way they prayed, everything was the most beautiful thing. So a couple days later, I went to the masjid, scared to death. I was the only one with a really pale complexion, saying, oh my goodness, here's all these people in beards. One of these guys, can I help you? Yeah. He was like, well, you here for Shahada? Yes. I have no idea what Shahada is. Yes, I'm here for Shahada. It's like, MashaAllah, yay! So I was like, oh, thank God. I feel so much more relieved. And everybody's like, yeah. So the brother who I'd spoken with who had me come to the masjid, he's like, so I understand, right? They were telling me that you want to do Shahada? He's like, you understand that's proclaiming that you're going to be a Muslim, you accept that, Allah is one, he has no other, the Prophet, may peace be upon him, is the final messenger of God. I was like, didn't even stop and think about it. Not a hesitation. I was like, yes, I want to be a Muslim. I want to proclaim that I'm a Muslim. Didn't even think of it for a split second. I just automatically said yes. And from that day on, it's been nothing but a blessing that has been tenfold every day. That's a really quick short.
Beautiful. Jazakallah for sharing that. It's very inspiring, Brother Mark. Jazakallah for sharing this story. What do you think awakened Brother Mark's fitrah, based on his story?
The people.
MashaAllah.
Yes.
Excellent. The people what? And their what?
Treatment, how they
Good treatment, character, right? And he said something very profound, like, their land is being invaded, and then in return, all he saw was hospitality, good treatment, good character, good conduct, and that was the way the process happened.
That was
That's
it. That was their dawah.
Yeah, and that's subhanAllah, it's very deep, man. Very deep. May Allah bless you. Okay, Brother Daniel, please.
Sure, make this quick stuff. Allah guides who he does, or Allah guides who he does. And really, when it comes down to it, I still feel like I was never worthy of any sort of mercy from Allah to be able to accept Islam. But it all generally came down that eventually at one point in my life, I wanted to understand who God was, if God exists, is he there, how he interacts with all sorts of people. So I went through every single religion, starting with Christianity, going to Buddhism, Taoism, any sort of ism, more or less. I studied and went through it, even philosophical thought, whatever sort of understanding that I could apply to myself, I wanted to keep to myself and use it to apply to make myself a better person, until eventually, ISIS became a huge thing, and a bad huge thing, but from their actings, was actually me trying to understand why would somebody who believes in God, and if it's an all-merciful God, why would they act this sort of way? So I went to, I bought a Quran, took it home, and about like halfway through I realized, if God wrote a book, this is the one.
SubhanAllah.
So I either have a choice of following the direction which is true, or I live a lie for the rest of my life. So, alhamdulillah.
Takbir. Beautiful. That's very good. So what do you guys think awakened Brother Daniel's fitrah?
The Quran.
ISIS. Okay. So I mean, in that sense, we can say it's beneficial one way, right? With all the misconceptions and whatnot's happening, and it's brought a lot of people to Islam, just the curiosity. So it was curiosity, and it was intellectual honesty, right? It was just you sincerely wanted to seek the truth, and so you studied and you took a more kind of like academic approach, right? And it was just that zeal in wanting to seek the truth, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala just guided you. So I think his drive was mostly just like he sincerely wanted the truth. He wanted the truth, and so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave it to him. Alhamdulillah. So we can see that the fitrah is awakened in different ways, and I think that's what we're trying to grab. The fitrah can be awakened in different ways, and hence, here we go, the clouded fitrah, right? So this is what happens. The fitrah becomes clouded. Everyone has a fitrah, right? And it can become clouded. It becomes clouded with what? So imagine, this is what this slide is trying to say. It's trying to say that the heart is clouded, and the way you can uncloud the fitrah, alhamdulillah, is via revelation. So you can present revelation. The Quran itself can uncloud the fitrah. Rational arguments, right? Rational arguments can uncloud the fitrah. Experiences, personal experiences, dealing with experiences can uncloud the fitrah. You telling people your experiences or sharing experiences. Reflection and introspection. So reflecting, tadabbur, right? Like Mark was talking about the seashells and whatnot that you saw, right? That was tadabbur, the tadabbur part. Rational arguments and revelation, that seems more of like Brother Daniel's, right? So that's kind of unclouded your fitrah. You were kind of seeking the truth. You were looking at things rationally, philosophically. You know, what makes sense? What's logical? What's pure? What's consistent? Revelation. Well, what is the true word of God? So this was Brother Daniel. It seems to be this was Brother Daniel, and this was more Brother Mark's follow. So just kind of cut it in the middle. Alhamdulillah. I should put here Mark and update him on this side.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, think about it, because Brother Mark had, you know,
So as long as we're together, we're good. We're whole.
that's it. Yeah, you guys are whole. One heart. Alhamdulillah.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because with Brother Mark, it was a personal experience. He was seeing people's character and conduct, right? So it was experience and reflection. Alhamdulillah. Barakallahu feekum. Very touching, very touching. Okay, so now let's get into the technicalities. Hope you guys are ready. If I get too technical, please stop me. But no, I'm going to try to make it as simple as possible. So how would you establish or explain that God exists? The big question. We're on G now, right? We just started Go Rap. Okay, khair, inshallah. So, Go Rap. We start with G, God's existence. So now that you've initiated the conversation, you came to a common sense agreement, you get to a point where you want to talk about God's existence, right? Because obviously you were trying to get into Tawheed. So the first thing you want to do is kind of check the person. Well, hey, what is your worldview? I mean, do you believe in God or you don't believe in God? Do you believe in a creator? Do you believe we're designed or we just came from nothingness or by chance? Or, you know, what is your belief? So how would you establish or explain that God exists? Let's kind of put this out to the crowd first. If someone came to you and they sincerely want to know, hey, all right, you know, I don't know if I believe in a God or not. Maybe I do, maybe I don't. You know, I'm agnostic. That's why agnostic. Everyone knows the difference between an atheist and an agnostic. The atheist lacks belief in God or religion. They completely deny it, right? Whereas the agnostic is in the middle. So they don't deny the existence of God, and they don't believe it either. So they're just middle ground there, right? So that's the agnostic. So how would you establish or explain that God exists? So here's someone wanting to know if God exists or not. What would be your response? What are some things that you could tell them, show them, hey, God does exist? We'll start with Ali. Give us like a pointer or two. We'll get some books. Don't elaborate too much.
The answer is in the Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says like the 4 points, where either like this world created itself, came from nothing, or it was created by something that is created, or something from uncreated.
Okay, interesting. I love this approach. We're going to talk about that more. Jazakallah khair.
Can you ask me the question again?
So, does God exist? Basically.
Yeah, I mean, I can prove it to you though. So, you see that watch that's on your hand?
We'll watch. This watch.
Yeah, that watch. So, I mean, it's a really nice watch, like, and you know, I like it too. But so that watch there, are you going to explain to me that the watch all came by itself? Nobody created the watch, nobody designed the watch, nobody put the parts and pieces all intricately together so that it can.
Does anyone know what that argument is? It has a name. And it's interesting that he used the watch as an example.
Intelligent design?
Intelligent design, yes, but it has a more specific name.
Nothing happens by itself, something does it, someone has to be behind it.
Sure, of course. Definitely. It's in relation to like first cause and stuff. It's called the watchmaker argument. I found it really interesting that you use the watch example. Look up watchmaker argument. So the watchmaker argument, yes, that's a good way to go about it too. You're talking about design and intellectual design and fine tuning, etc. Yeah. Okay, that's a good starting. Anyone else want to add or? Okay, this is a good way to start in terms of God's existence. So, belief, reason, argument. This is how you deal with God's existence. So the first thing is you state your belief firmly. I do believe in a creator, respectfully. This is my personal belief. Then you provide the reasons. Well, these are the reasons why I believe in a creator, right? Like, the honest truth is the atheist has absolutely no proof, right? As to, you know, the fact that, you know, there is or isn't an existence. They can't prove anything. So the Muslim in this case has the upper hand because we believe in the supernatural, whereas they don't believe in the supernatural. So we have a lot of reasons to present. And then finally, the agreement. You understand what I just said. This is really important. This is a really important step that I think is missed a lot of times. Is after you've given them the reason, ask them, hey, does this make sense to you? Check. Because if they say yes, that's actually a great step, mashallah. They've accepted what you said and it makes sense to them. If they say, well, that doesn't really make sense, can you elaborate more on this? Or they'll try to counter or argue maybe. So then try to deal with it accordingly. But that's the approach. Okay. So let's go through some approaches as to how to explain God's existence. The first is similar to what Brother Daniel mentioned, which is the watchmaker argument, also known as the intellectual design argument, also known as the teleological argument. So you can call it whatever you want, or even the fine-tuning argument. But basically, yes, you can use your phone as an example, or the watch even, and say, hey, okay, so if I told you that this phone right here doesn't have a designer, doesn't have an engineer, doesn't have a fashioner, etc., etc., it's not programmed, there's no firmware on it, no software updates, would you believe me, right? Obviously, they would say, no, I mean, that's illogical, right? And